Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to go over one of the case studies that are on my website that basically shows you a framework that you can use for any website or mobile app redesign. It goes through a whole bunch of different phases from initial benchmarking, gaining access to data, and through prototyping, user testing, and all the way into launch. And this was a really successful project. Ultimately, we went from a usability score of 47 out of 100 and all the way up to 94. So it was a really super successful project, and that's why I wanted to share it with you today. But before we jump into it, I just wanted to sort of introduce myself. I guess three fun things are about me. My name is Justin. I'm a user experience designer, and I currently live in Brisbane. Um, I have I'm originally from South Africa, so I've lived in South Africa, in Switzerland, in the United Kingdom, also in the Canary Islands for a bit, and currently I live in Brisbane, and that's where I'm actually shooting this video from. Other things are I've worked for a number of different companies, really big brands, some of them, so Sky TV, Oakley Eyewear, the Financial Times, Unibet Sports Betting, um, WWE Wrestling. I redesigned their responsive website, and currently I work for Deloitte Digital, which is the biggest digital agency in Brisbane at the moment. And just so a bit of I guess a bit of credibility for myself. And then I guess outside of work, I'm a parent. I've got two children and a beautiful wife who I love to bits, and I love skateboarding and surfing on the side of doing all this user experience design. So that's me as a person, but really what I want to show you today, like I said, is this framework for redesigning either websites or mobile apps with a data-driven approach, and that's what I wanted to share with you today. So what you can see here is Odds Checker Football. This is the case study that I'm going to go over quite briefly, and what you can see up here is a whole bunch of the screens that ended up coming out of that redesign project. The project itself probably spanned over a period of about 4 or 5 months, and we did a whole bunch of different things to get the right data to inform the redesign, and there were a number of stakeholders involved as well. So it was quite a complex little project. Um, but to, to sort of set the scene, I guess, what this website is, Odds Checker, it's an odds comparison website that is live in 5 different countries. So it handles a number of different languages. It's fully responsive, and the previous version of the website, it it was it was performing pretty badly for a number of reasons. It had poor information architecture. It had an interface that was kind of dated. There were inconsistencies across it, so people didn't know what to expect when they clicked different elements because they behaved inconsistently. A button might do one thing on one page, but it might behave as a drop down on another. Um, there were quite a few different things that were wrong with it, and so this website redesign was um, initiated really to fix all of those. So again, like I said, the project highlights was it went from 47 out of 100 up to 94 out of 100 in terms of usability. So that's really good. Something like Spotify, that'll probably score in the 90s out of 100, and as you can see, it's kind of taken over the world. Mass adoption, people love it, and that's sort of what you want to get for each one of your projects that you redesign. So I'm just going to breeze through this case study. You can always come check it out. You can see the URL up here. It's on my portfolio. But I'm just going to try and keep this video kind of brief and just touch on the main topics. So this is a quick before and after. On the left, you can see what it used to look like. And then as you scroll over it, you can see what it looked like in the end. So before the redesign, it was a really dark interface, really oppressive. Um, and on the right hand side, a much more modern, spaced out look where it's got a light interface, and basically a lot more popular across the industry is light interfaces these days. So, like I said, I'm going to go through the different stages of the project. So it was broken up into an initial research phase, where we looked at different data sources such as Google Analytics, and those kinds of things to get the right data to see how people were currently using the site. And then after that, we also did some initial user testing to identify any issues. and sort of get a benchmark usability score, which ended up being 47. And we also looked at competitors. We made sure that when we redesigned the new site, that it would actually mimic what other competitors were doing in some way, so that users would understand how to use the new website. So to start off with, again, we did a whole bunch of research, and we used data sources, so, like qualitative sources as well as quantitative, whether that was through user testing or visitor intent polls, or looking at quantitative data, so looking at Google Analytics, behavioral click maps, or customer satisfaction polls. We used a whole bunch of different data sources to inform our decisions. And so, once we had done all of this research, what we did was we mocked up a bunch of prototypes. We fleshed out different user journeys, the most important ones really to the business, and the ones that users would most commonly take, and we put those into user testing, and we iterated from there. And I'll go into that further down in the case study. But really, what we learned from the first round of user testing was that a lot of users found the tasks very difficult because the navigation on the existing website, um, it didn't match what users expected. So you can see, if I go before and after here, you've got a clear home page, you've got a place for live scores, you've got a place for all of the fixtures and results, a place to navigate to different leagues and cups to learn more about those, and then tables and football tips. Whereas before, it was literally just links to the top 4 leagues, and otherwise you had no idea of how to access other content. So quick sort of example as to the information architecture and how it was really falling short in the beginning. And so, going into a bit more detail here about the initial research, what we did was we ran baseline user testing, and for that we needed to have a user profile. So we learned that users were mainly male. They were in an age range of 18 to 55 years old, and they play sports bets weekly. And this helped us to set up a user test in usertesting.com, which is a fantastic platform. I'd highly recommend it. And the key takeaway here was, although the test was made up of just 5 short tasks, one video came back that was over 30 minutes long. And the kind of tasks that we set up were basically asking people to navigate maybe from the homepage all the way down to a fixtures page, maybe a game between Premier League and another team, and then comparing odds and then placing a bet. And like as I mentioned, one video came back and was over 30 minutes long, and this showed us immediately like this navigation does not make sense to the current user base. So it really needed to change. And that was a really persuasive argument when we pitched that to the stakeholders, saying like, look guys, we really need to redesign this. And so the way I've written this up here is also, it's quite indicative of the results. So the key takeaways. So we tested with 5 different users for this user test, and 4 users said that finding a specific sport on the homepage was difficult. 3 said that the secondary navigation bar is confusing, that there's no consistency. 2 users said that it's not obvious what the site does from the homepage, and 2 users said there's a lot of information to take in. And I would probably put that down to the dark interface, because a dark interface like this, it's quite hard to take in such a lot of data. As you can see from the redesigned interface, it's a lot more spacious, it's white, it's a lot easier to take in the information. So these were some issues that we tried to address in the redesign. We also then ran a visitor intent poll. So basically that's asking customers, what is the purpose of your visit today? And you run that sort of feedback poll on the homepage, and you try to run it until you get about 500 responses, so that it's statistically significant, that it's actually representative of what your entire population on your website actually feels. So about 50% of users wanted to compare odds, 19% wanted to read tips, 17% wanted to view upcoming events, and only 3% wanted to place a bet. So that was a bit alarming, because users didn't really seem to know that they could place a bet on the website, and that's really how the company makes money. So that highlighted some issues there. We also ran a feedback poll, so that was just with an open text field on a little pop up that came up on the website, and that allowed people to just write in how they thought that the website could be improved. So we asked them, what do you think we can do to improve your experience? We got 258 responses. A lot of them were rude insults, which is quite common. You often get rude insults, um, but it's kind of indicative as well. But the biggest thing here was poor navigation, that they couldn't get the betting odds, and the content was irrelevant. So again, more insights, but really what we were just doing here was building a big case that we could take then to the C-suite executives and say, look, these are the main issues in the voice of your users. These are the main issues that we need to address on the website. So this was really building ourselves a case. Before we did the redesign, we kind of had a hunch that the website needed work and it was a bit subpar, like below standard. But this really gave us ammunition to bring into the boardroom. We also ran some heat maps to see where people were clicking and where people were scrolling. And what we learned was that most people didn't really scroll very far below the fold. And it just sort of highlights the importance of keeping your page as concise as possible. We ran a customer satisfaction poll. This was very interesting. That's basically asking people how they feel about your current website. So it's a multi-choice field, and you've got all these options. You've got not at all satisfied, not so satisfied, somewhat satisfied, very satisfied, or extremely satisfied. And these were the results we got. Your ideal is kind of, you have all the responses in these last two sections here. So people must really love your product, but people were kind of a bit meh about the product. They didn't really feel very much. So you're not going to get people coming back to a website that they feel meh about. You're not going to get people recommending a website that they feel meh about. You want to shoot for this. You want to have people really loving your website. So again, more fuel, more ammunition for that case we're going to present back to the C-suite executives. So from the conclusion of all that research was that we had revealed about a whole lot of high severity issues, and now we had a solid case to actually present back to the board and say, look, guys, these are the things we need to fix on your website. So after we did that and we had the buy-in, we then went about the next stage of the redesign, which was basically doing a bit of a competitor analysis to see what other competitors were doing, what our users might expect from our product, and basically how we could meet their expectations as in terms of what they are used to seeing around the industry. So so some of the competitors I looked at, because now remember we're doing sports betting odds comparison. It's quite specific, but looking at BBC Sport, Sky Bet, Bet365, and Unibet, those are some of the big players in the sports betting world. There was another point of reference in Australia called punters.com.au, and they're actually an odds comparison um, website. So that was perfect. A really good example to have a look at, see how they've done things in the past. If there's anything we can learn from them, they were a really great point of reference. So, yeah. Another thing to think about also was the concept of odds comparison in Australia was pretty new. Anywhere outside of the UK, it was a pretty new concept. So there was a lot of communication that we had to place on the website saying that you can compare odds. We had to really just make it really clear for any first-time user that this is the purpose of the website. And so what we learned from this competitor benchmarking is that most sports and betting websites have clear information architecture. They have a dedicated area to each content type, such as fixtures, results, tables, and live scores. And maybe an intuitive navigation pattern would be something like, if you want to go and find a fixture, you would navigate by first sport, and then maybe by country, and then maybe by competition, i.e., like Premier League, and then fixture, and then you might, and then on that fixture, because remember it's betting, you'd want to find the betting market, and then find maybe the player you want to bet on. So really keeping in mind these types of common patterns like navigation or like the typical journey a user might take on one of those competitor websites. How could we build that into this new product that we were redesigning so that each user that typically places a sports bet, when they come to our site, that it just makes sense just like that? Bang. So now that we've done a whole bunch of competitor benchmarking and really it's sort of began to understood the information architectures on other websites, what sort of content they were showing, and what we should kind of be aligning our final solution to. We started to get into Sketch and getting some wireframes together because we needed to now present back our initial concepts, and wireframes are really the best way to do that. Often in a business, you might not get a full set of requirements for a project, and in this case, that was definitely the case. The best way for us to actually elicit those requirements from the business was to fuel conversations with wireframes, starting to get some detail in here, some real talking points, and starting to understand what the business really felt they needed, what we thought would be good for users, and then ultimately we could then take these wireframes and put them in front of customers and get them to feedback on them, so we can refine the solution. So we came up with a bunch of wireframes for different areas of the website. Here we can see soccer home, live scores, and then all fixtures. And the information architecture, the way that we group the content, that was all structured on that competitor benchmarking. So definitely a very data-driven approach. We had a bunch of facts behind us. We definitely weren't just going on what we thought was best, but we had really informed ourselves before we had even got into the wireframes, and that's pretty important. And so, like some of the talking points we might have had would be, what will the new navigation look like, and how would that work in different countries? Because remember, this website it was live in 5 countries: Australia, Denmark, Germany, Spain, and Italy. Like 5 vastly different cultures and languages, each with their own demands in terms of word length, how users might consume the content. So we really started. We had these wireframes, but as you can see, they're in English. But we really had to start to think about how title lengths might work, and how the whole system would work in a different language and in a different culture. And the also a really important part of this stage was, if you're redesigning a website, you're not just redesigning a website, you're actually also redesigning the way that some of the employees of this business, in this case odds checker, might be working, because you're suddenly putting a hero spot up here, but you have to think about, like, where is that content going to come from, who's going to be placing those images up there, and also when you're although we had done a whole bunch of competitor research to inform the solution, the experts about the content were really at the business at OddsChecker. They knew the content inside and out. So really validating these initial concepts with people who worked in the business was extremely important. So yeah, we ran them past the content managers, and one of the products of those conversations was having fallbacks. So for example, when content's unavailable, like when none of the betting odds are unavailable, or when none of the offers are available, what should we show instead? So these were all some of the initial thinkings that we got out of these conversations. It was extremely important. Um, so then once I'd come up with all these wireframes, this project, I would say it was time boxed into a pretty short period of time. Also, we had to get the thing live before the football season kicked off, so we didn't have a very long time. So it was a really good experiment into into lean user experience design. We knocked up these wireframes, and pretty much as soon as we had a concept ready, we created these high fidelity prototypes in Invision, and immediately we didn't even go in black and white. We slapped color on. We applied the branding that had been worked on the mobile app at the same time. And so each time we were testing, a customer really got a feeling that they were testing a pretty finished product. Although we'd tell them, like, look, this is a prototype and some areas might not work, um, it felt pretty real because it had all of the correct colors and color coding applied. And so with the first sets of user testing, it's like pretty important to know we didn't just do one set of user tests. we ran multiple iterations because each time we learned something and then we'd tweak the design accordingly. Um, each test, we only used 5 participants, and the reason we just used 5 is because if you look on a Nielsen Norman website, for example, you'll as soon as you have 5 users go over your prototype and perform some tasks, about 90% of all of the issues are going to be found. Also, in a short time frame, you've got to think, if you do 10 videos, you've got to watch all of those 10 videos each time. So 5 is typically enough. 5 users is typically enough for user testing, and you can look at any website online. It'll tell you the same. It's different if you're doing quantitative. So if you are getting responses on a survey, you might need like 500 or in that sort of region. But for actual in-depth user testing like this, 5 is typically enough. And some examples of some of the feedback that we got on the prototypes was that the 3 users struggled to find the results area for football, so we had to tweak the way that we designed that page. Um, three users commented that it might be able to switch between betting markets when they're on the football page. So I'll show you. I've added a floating action button there so that you could just change the market really quickly. Um, 3 users mentioned that they'd like to see more supplementary information, such as betting tips. So we added those at the bottom of each page, and 2 users commented that labeling above bet types could be improved. So actually calling out exactly what type of bet was being placed. So for example, if you can see here in the detail, you've got this says this is a game between Huddersfield and Tottenham, and these odds are for the home win. This is for the draw, and that's for the away win. So really adding in extra labels there so that users could really understand what each of these bets were, making it completely foolproof. The microcopy in this type of interface is really essential that you nail that. So that was some of the user testing we did. I think we ended up going through 3 rounds, and ultimately we got to 94 out of 100 for usability testing. And I think the thing that felt the best about that was at the end of the project, being able to stand up in front of a crowd of like 80 people at the company and present to them this solution that we had actually thoroughly tested with members of the audience, and know that this was going to really deliver value. It wasn't some sort of opinion-led design. It was completely data-driven, whether it was from running the competitor analysis to doing the benchmarking, the benchmark user testing, running the feedback polls and the heat maps, and looking where people were clicking. We really got a full picture ahead of the project, so that we knew we were solving all of the right problems, and that showed in the user testing, and in the end, it delivered a whole lot of value for the company as well. So that's what really felt the best when I was presenting that back to the company. Um, so like definitely a great method to approach any sort of redesign with. So here you can see what the final one of the screenshots from the final user test. So this is the second iteration. Um, People started to find it really easy. This is what they expected. The navigation made sense. All of the labeling and the microcopy, it all made sense. The branding made the product feel real, and people just got it. And so this is really what the soccer homepage looked like at the end. So yeah, some of the features won't really go into that too much. You can have a read on the website, but ultimately the website's responsive across 5 breakpoints, and here are some of the screens that I had to mock up. Um, can even view it live if you want to. I'll quickly jump into Sketch. So this is the Sketch file that I actually ended up working in. So you can see I mocked it up for the iPhone 5, iPhone 6, and all the way up. And this is what I was talking about when one of the customers commented that it would be nice to be able to change betting markets while they were actually browsing content. Just added this little button down here that would float above the odds, and then as you scrolled to the end of them, it would hide. So yeah, so there you can see some of the breakpoints that I mocked up, and yeah, there's a whole there's a whole bunch of stuff in here, whole bunch of pages that I had to end up mocking up. Pretty complex project, but I hope this has been really helpful. So, like I said, really going through research, competitor benchmarking, baseline user testing, really gathering all of that as different data sources, and then taking it into user testing and through a couple different rounds. So, if you like this video, definitely hit like and subscribe. I'll be posting a whole lot more of these. I've got more case studies in the pipeline, so I'm looking forward to sharing them with you guys. All right, thanks a lot. Have a great day.